Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Clinic Loop podcast, brought to you by Valor Promotions, your AI growth partner for healthcare and home service businesses. Today, I have an industrious guest. He is a trailblazing entrepreneur, especially during the COVID era. Won't you please welcome Charles Donaldson, founder and CEO of Avanta Medical?
Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
Good morning. Why don't you tell us a little about yourself and your practice?
Yeah, absolutely. So I own Avanta Medical. We do medical devices for the aesthetic industry. I started the company back in 2017. We started it primarily as a consulting business and helping med spas grow and become larger, start their business plans, things like that, and kind of just developed into devices in really making an impact on that phase of the med spas and really trying to save money and bring a new market to the med spa industry to help them grow their profits and revenue.
Absolutely. Now, you had helped a med spa from the ground up to, I think, 124 locations across the US and Canada. And you touched upon back in 2017, you walked away. Most people at that scale would have stayed and collected. What were you actually working towards?
Correct. Yeah. So I had done a long stint with getting that med spa started up, and we grew it nationwide, like you had mentioned. And I just got to thinking of I could keep climbing the corporate ladder, keep doing that, making money for another company, or I could go and really have my passion for these smaller med spas and the industry that's coming up to be able to allow them to make the profits and to do all of that. So that's where we got into consulting in 2017. Like you mentioned, I left and started Avanta Medical, and it's all been a process since then.
Now, before Avanta existed, what were you actually doing day to day as a consultant? You just kind of touched upon it, but what did you think the job was going to be versus what it turned out to be?
Yeah, so I thought primarily it was going to be going in, looking at financials and helping them figure out what best way to manage their financials to become more profitable. And what it really turned into was about a lot of business planning and getting business plans started and helping those med spas actually start up, become profitable, and make an impact in business.
Hmm. Now, you said you were referring consulting clients to the big device companies and watching the consumables drain their profitability. At what point did that shift from frustrating to unacceptable for you?
Yeah, pretty early on, and that's where we got going from just consulting to really getting into the medical devices. So when I looked at it as just being consulting and things like that, one of the biggest challenges I had was getting devices successful in that practice and making money. And that's always one of the hardest things when starting a med spa or looking at profitability. So because of my connections and stuff, I had connections with all the big names out there, and I would just refer them on, kind of business to business relationship and having a partnership with them. And after after some time, I realized that really that was making my job impossible because it was making it impossible for me to get them up and running and making money within 6 months. And the main reason for that being because of the ridiculous cost of the aesthetic devices in our industry, not only the initial outlay of cost that goes into that, but then the aesthetic industry as well as some other medical industries are very well known for having consumables, right? So consumables are things that you must have in order for the devices to run. Uh, well, in the aesthetic world, a lot of those consumables are unnecessary. You don't need them. They're there just for the device companies to keep making money. And again, going back to it, it just made my job incredibly hard. So I was like, I have to find a partner that has top quality devices, that is able to deliver on non-consumables or just a better partnership for our clients that we have. looked and looked and looked, couldn't find anything whatsoever. And then finally, you mentioned COVID. That's really the start of COVID when we started the devices. We had plenty of time to go into FDA clearance and really nail down the manufacturing and all that. So it was good timing in that realm. But I got to the point where I was like, there's nobody out there. I'm just going to do this myself. Took on that task, and here we are years later, and doing really well with our clients and going on that mission and really executing it.
You're the epitome of the guests that we look for. I mean, as far as that innovation in a niche in this industry that you just said, listen, I've searched high and low, couldn't find one, and I'm just going to do it myself. So that's impressive. What did that feel like? I mean, as far as, I don't know, that decision to kind of just lean into manufacturing. It's 2020, COVID hits, business is slowing down, and just walk me through that decision. I mean, how it felt in the moment. Was it a clarity? Was it stubbornness? I mean, was it just straight determination? Like, I'm just going to make this work.
Yeah, personally, I really get motivated by things that I know are going to make a big impact, which is going back to the days of starting Avanta, why I chose to do that, take on a big risk. It wasn't necessarily about the risk, but it was being able to do what I want to do out there. And then when it came to the devices, that same type of environment and mentality. So for me, it's just really about accomplishing success with other people and helping them along the way to further their business.
Absolutely. I love that business to business relationship. What does the name Avanta mean to you personally? Did the mission behind the name exist before the company, or did it come into focus as you were building it?
Yeah, it came into focus as I was building it, trying to figure out a name. But basically, Avanta means to soar, and the definition of that being to rapidly rise above the rest. So that's kind of our mission is to soar, to help other practices soar and become better and better and better.
Were there anybody that you were talking to in the industry that, speaking of specifically the consumables, the per use fees, companies depend on that recurring revenue. Were there people that were telling you, no, the model that you are proposing is just, it's not going to work?
Absolutely, I had a lot of competition out there, the big names that are out there, and they're like I said, I had a bunch of connections and still do, but they'd be like, "How do you plan on keep making money?" Like that's how we make our money is the consumables, and that's never going to work for you. And I'm like, well, because your clients don't want to do business with you anymore. They're mad at you. They feel like they're getting ripped off and they won't go back to you. They're just forced to stay in business with you right now. Our clients, they're going to do so well that they're going to either add machine, add devices, they're going to add a second, third, fourth location, and they're going to be so satisfied with us that they're going to be coming to us for those devices. So
See.
yeah, I had plenty of people telling me that, but I didn't believe in it. So I think that's really what matters.
Yeah, that determination. You mentioned that most device companies sell the device and almost disappear afterwards. You provide, I mean, comprehensive manuals, training included in your service. Now, where did that philosophy come from, and why do you think so few competitors actually do this?
So, I'm very blessed to have a great VP of medical who has a ton of experience. So a lot of those protocols and stuff come from her. But really comes down to we don't want to be, we're top technology, like I mentioned, but at a more affordable cost. But we don't want to be that name that everyone thinks is cheap or not providing the service because in the long run, the customer service side of things is what's going to keep us in business and keep our business going. We took that into aspect when doing it and wanting to make sure that everyone is fully knowledgeable because you have nurses and nurse practitioners and doctors even um, and then all the way down to estheticians where, yeah, they went to school, they are passionate about aesthetics, but they still don't know. There's so many devices and so many different things out there So they really have to be handheld or they're just kind of lost.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's thousands. Now, this may be off the record, so I won't say a specific name, but it sounds like you recently signed a large partnership. I mean, we're talking several hundreds of med spots across the US, all being referred your way. What does a deal like that signal about the direction the industry is moving? And how did Avanta earn that level of trust?
It took us quite a while. Like I said, our VP of medical is amazing. She's actually been working with this company for couple years now, and it's just showing that consistent customer service, the care for the clients, and earning our way into that network. But like you said, they have over 300 locations that they manage, um, and across the country, and now we're their preferred vendor for their devices. And it's really just by providing that and being consistent with it and kind of closing that loop.
Exciting. Now, you went through the FDA process, figured out manufacturing, launched an entire line during the pandemic. What did you get completely wrong in the first build, and how did you fix it?
I thought it was a lot easier than it would be or than it was. So, just little nuances that you don't think about until you're actually using the device in daily practice and stuff. But nothing really major, adding a foot pedal here to make it easier for the provider, doing little things like that that are good little touches to have a great device.
You're kind of exhibiting aesthetics next in, I think, believe Dallas, full display setup. For a practice owner walking up to your booth with no prior knowledge of Avanta, what's the one thing you want them to walk away understanding that they didn't know what they knew when they walked in?
The majority of the consumables, like I mentioned, that are on devices are not necessary. And a lot of people, just because of how they're trained by the company they purchased it from or whatever the case may be, they don't fully understand that. And they kind of in their mind have been trained to think that those consumables are necessary.
Yeah, I mean, that's important. That is a differentiator, a key differentiator in the industry. You mentioned Avanta is updating its devices to incorporate AI, leaning more into the technology side of things. What does AI actually mean in the context of a fractional CO2 laser? And what does that unlock for practices using it?
Yeah, really what comes down to with AI when it comes to our devices is the interface of it and, kind of being foolproof with the settings so that we're reducing adverse reactions and things of that nature. So that's really, really what it is.
Now, thinking back to that time where you were scaling over 124 locations, systems were everything, but you couldn't be in the room at each of those locations. If you were building that same operation today and with what we have now with AI, what are the tools what's the first thing you would implement to kind of set up automation and why?
Well, if I was running an actual practice, it would be like you mentioned, the systems and everything, because everything from scheduling to answering the phones to anything you're doing to operate your clinic right now is driven around that AI factor. And it's, doing it very effectively to make the clinics run a lot better. So that's really how I would look at it and then move into the devices and things like that.
Speaking with practices currently, do you feel like they're leaning into AI in their operations, or is that still on like
Absolutely. Yep.
they are more so leaning? Okay.
Yeah.
Where have you seen it?
Well, like I mentioned, same thing. The scheduling, the interaction with clients, the everything that comes to the operational part of it.
Yeah. So you've actually seen it in the practice. That's great news, as I have as well. But I just want to see. I mean, you're Central America. Just want to see where it's growing and where it's kind of being ignored right now. Where's the line for you between technology that improves a practice and technology that undermines the human experience that patients actually come for? And how do you help your clients find that line?
I can see it on the scheduling and things like that because we all nowadays get to AI, like AI answers the phone for everything. It loses that human connectivity sometimes. However, the consumer is very responsive to AI. So I don't think it's as big of a deal as we thought it would be, but there is still some of that.
Right, right. Now, are these practices, are they keeping the human in the loop, if you will, where if things do need to be escalated, are they being
Yes.
routed to a human pretty smoothly? Good, good. Yeah, I had seen that be introduced, and I mean that's where I'm coming from too. Is you got to keep the human in the loop. Um, so it's not just AI. People don't feel isolated because we are in such a transformative stage. It's important. Now, private equity, kind of leaning into the industry as a whole, it is moving into aesthetics, buying up practices. There's real rumblings about legislation being introduced, who can administer these devices in these med spas. For an independent med spa owner listening to this right now, what do they need to do today to protect their position before that wave hits?
Well, I mean, I guess it first of all comes down to whether or not they want to do it, because like you mentioned, it's becoming very, very popular. And a lot of people would rather do that. They're doctors or medical staff, and they're there for the medical side of things, and they just want somebody else to run the business. So that's one of the reasons it's going so well in our industry, because it has kind of that balance that needs to be there between medical and business. Other than that, if they aren't interested in it, then I think things are going to get more compact, and it's just going to continue. So they'll have to eventually get okay with it.
And what do you think the ultimate vision of the industry looks like, say 10 years?
A lot more consolidated because right now you've got a different med spa, sometimes two on the same corner. That uh, there's a lot of business out there, and it's very popular right now.
Mhm.
But eventually, we're going to have to consolidate, just like back in the day when Starbucks had 3,000 locations and they had to cut out half of them to consolidate because they were cannibalizing each other.
Okay. Well, so for the practices that are already in the game, what separates the ones that break out and build something real from the ones that get squeezed out in the next 3 years?
Yeah, those that are going down that path of private equity and doing that, it really comes down to actually doing what they're telling you to do because you have so many people, they want to go in there just to sell it and make their money, but they don't really have the belief of whatever the private equity firm is trying to deploy and all that. So really making sure they grasp onto that and are there for a true partnership, not just to get the cash out, because if that's what you want, you need to look at a different route.
Now, how can they kind of pivot? Is it really the introduction of new devices, or how do they maintain that edge that they may have?
I think that comes down to the capabilities of the private equity firm that gets involved. So that's why it's very, very important to make sure as a client that you're doing your due diligence in order to make sure that because there's plenty of private equity out there. So you don't just have to go with anybody, there's options, but making sure that they're doing their diligence as well and choosing the right private equity firm.
Gotcha. Now, insurance-based providers, I mean, chiropractors, internists, are moving into cash-based aesthetics because they already have the patients and they're seeing the margin. Now, is that a trend that helps independent med spas or threatens them? How a little bit more cash-based? Do you think that is a trend that helps independent med spas or threatens them?
I think it threatens the individual med spas because now you're having people's primary care physicians and people that, they're gynecologists, things like that, that they've been to going to them for years and years, so they trust them. But on that same note, they're getting into aesthetics because, like you mentioned, the insurance industry is just so crazy now, and they want other sources of income besides having to rely on insurance all the time and all that good stuff. And aesthetics is such a top market that is so relatable to so many different practices.
Well, as far as giving the prescription to your industry for change. If you could change one thing about the aesthetic device industry tomorrow, the one thing would genuinely level the playing field for every independent practice owner, what would it be?
I'd have to go back to the cost of devices and stuff with that because the average markup on devices are 85%. That's astronomical. And what we see is the only people making money are the device companies, and then you've got med spas going out of business. It creates a bad name for device companies and, um, really changing that and getting that balanced out.
What's the advice you're kind of giving yourself in private on the phone with a struggling practice owner that you'd want to say publicly right now to every med spa operator listening to us?
That it doesn't take $1 million in equipment financing to get your practice started. Choosing more affordable options and things like that, and ensuring that you're purchasing the devices that are going to be best for your practice. You could do it for less than $300,000. So we're talking a third of the cost, which when it comes to paying your bills and making money, that's a huge factor.
Yeah. Wow. Now, for that same practice owner listening right now, based on everything we talked about today, what's the one move that they can make this week to start closing the gap between where they are and where they want to be?
Making sure that so on one note, making sure they have the right devices, but at the same time, making sure that they're not skimping on devices and they're only starting with this device. Because how I like to explain it is, and of course, this is all relative on what they can afford, but when you have a practice, especially when you're just starting up, if you start with just laser hair removal or just CO2 and then injectables and things like that, you're narrowing your market to just that device. And then, people are always like, "Oh, I want to add more devices a year down the road." And it's like, well, is that going to be best for you? Because what you're having to do now is redo your entire business a year down the road to incorporate these other lasers and things like that. And who knows how many clients you lost from not having those lasers and being properly equipped at the beginning and during roll off and launch.
Yeah. I mean, I could only imagine. I mean, that, that pivot after launch, yeah, I mean, that can affect so much. So, yeah, it's a fine balance. I mean, a med spa that hasn't started yet can easily do that. And then once you're started, as far as the business plan, what is the mindset of that business owner that wants to take that full inventory of those strategic devices that are going to make a difference? I mean, any additional advice?
No, but it seems that like the people that are interested in it and understand that they've been thinking about it already. The real challenge is getting those people that haven't thought about it, they didn't factor it into their med spa, their business plan, all that. The biggest challenges is getting those people in line with the business plan and getting all the devices up and running. And what we typically see is those ones that do have interest in it and understand from the business side, they typically have already been thinking about it and they're a little bit easier. Really, where it comes in for us to play is those people that haven't thought about it. They haven't factored it into their business plan. They haven't factored it into anything, and they might not even have the money to do it realistically. So it's really working with those people to get them to understand what a couple $1,000s extra a month is going to do for them and device payments.
Any parting shots? Anything you want to mention before we?
No, no, I think that was great.
Okay. Where can they find you?
Yeah, so they can find us. Obviously, we have nationwide presence, some in Mexico as well, and our website is www.avanta3.com. So that's the word Avanta and the number 3.com.
I want to thank you today for being a guest. I think you had some very insightful answers, and I wish you the best with the growth of Avanta and the new ventures.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate your time, Mike, and I look forward to it.
Me too. Thanks.